Nina never intended to stay this long. When she moved in with Sarah and Daniel after her breakup, it was supposed to be temporary, a place to catch her breath, regain her footing, and move on. But days turned into weeks, and then months, and she found herself lingering in their home, a quiet observer in the life they had built together. Sarah, her older sister, had always been the one who had it all together, strong, confident, effortlessly charming. Even in their childhood, while Nina struggled to find her place, Sarah was the golden girl, the one people gravitated toward, the one who made things look easy. When she married Daniel, it seemed only natural they fit. He was warm where she was, sharp, steady where she was impulsive. They were a team, the kind of love story people admired, and Nina had admired them too, until admiration became something else. She first noticed it in the small things, the way Daniel laughed at her jokes, even the ones Sarah rolled her eyes at, how he remembered how she took her coffee, sometimes bringing it to her in the morning before Sarah even woke up, the way he listened, truly listened, when she talked about her failed relationship, about the ache of losing someone who once felt irreplaceable. At first, she told herself it was just kindness. Daniel was a good man, he loved Sarah, he was only trying to make Nina feel welcome, to help her heal. But there were moments, fleeting, nearly invisible, where something passed between them, a charged silence, a glance held just a second too long. She told herself she was imagining it. Until the night, she wasn't. Sarah was away for the weekend, a work trip she had been dreading. You to take care of each other, she had said before leaving, kissing Daniel on the cheek and squeezing Nina's hand. The words had lingered in the air, too heavy, too ironic. That night, the house felt different, quieter, closer. They sat on the couch with a bottle of wine between them, talking about nothing and everything. It was easy with Daniel, easier than it should have been. He had a way of making her feel seen, not as Sarah's little sister, not as the girl who couldn't hold on to love, but as someone worth knowing. When the storm started outside, Nina shivered. Daniel noticed, without thinking. He reached for the blanket draped over the couch and pulled it around her shoulders, his fingers brushing her skin, a harmless gesture. But then his hand lingered. Just for a second. Nina held her breath. Daniel didn't move away. 1,000 unspoken words hung between them. She could hear the rain against the windows, the slow, steady rhythm of her own pulse. She should have pulled back, made a joke, broken the tension. Instead, she looked at him, and he looked back, and in that moment, Nina knew this wasn't kindness. This wasn't harmless. She had crossed a line, and she wasn't sure she wanted to step back. Nina spent the next morning convincing herself nothing had changed. She moved through the house with careful precision, her hands steady as she poured coffee, her voice even as she exchanged pleasantries with Daniel. It was nothing, a moment of misplaced emotion, a trick of the dim lighting and the lull of wine-induced warmth. Yet something in the air felt different. Daniel barely spoke, his usual easygoing nature subdued, his gaze avoiding hers as if eye contact alone would unravel whatever thread had tightened between them. Nina told herself she was grateful for his restraint. If he pretended nothing had happened, so could she. But pretending was a thing. The illusion cracked when Sarah called that afternoon. Her voice was light, carefree, completely unaware of the shift that had taken place in her absence. "I miss you guys," she said, laughter threading through her words. "Is he behaving, taking care of himself while I'm gone?" Nina forced a smile, even though Sarah couldn't see her. Of course. "You know Daniel, always on top of things." She expected Daniel to make some teasing remark, to roll his eyes in that way he always did when Sarah playfully nagged him. But he didn't. He sat across from Nina at the kitchen table, stirring his coffee too slowly, his expression unreadable. And in that silence, Nina felt something dangerous take root. Later that evening, as she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, she searched for signs of guilt in her reflection. She should have felt something, shame, regret, anything that might remind her of the person she was supposed to be. Instead, all she found was anticipation. She didn't have to wait long. Daniel found her in the hallway, pausing just long enough to make it impossible for her to move past him without acknowledging his presence. His eyes met hers, cautious, but unwavering. "About last night," he started. Nina swallowed, her throat dry. It was nothing. It was a lie, and judging by the way Daniel exhaled, slow and measured, He knew it too, yeah, he murmured, but the hesitation in his voice betrayed him. He didn't believe it. Neither did she. The days that followed were an exercise in restraint. Every touch became a calculation, every glance a risk. Nina memorized the moments she shouldn't have. The way Daniel's fingers brushed against hers when he handed her a mug. The way his voice softened when he said her name. They existed in stolen seconds, in the space between what was allowed and what was inevitable. And then, just when she thought she had learned to navigate the treacherous balance between longing and self-control, Daniel broke it. It was late. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of television static. Nina had gone to the kitchen for water, expecting nothing but solitude. Instead, she found him there, standing in the dim glow of the stove light. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a voice so quiet it barely reached her, Daniel said, "I think about you." Nina's breath caught. "Don't," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant it. But Daniel didn't move away. He didn't push, didn't demand anything from her. He just stood there, waiting, giving her the choice, and for the first time, Nina realized she had already made it. Nina told herself she would stop. That night, after Daniel's quiet confession in the restraint, she had pressed her palms against her temples, whispering to herself that it wasn't real, that it was just loneliness twisting itself into something dangerous. But the next morning, she caught herself lingering in the hallway, waiting for a glimpse of him. Daniel was different now, more careful, more deliberate. He no longer avoided her, but his presence carried a quiet weight. As if they both knew they had set something in motion neither of them had the strength to stop. Sarah returned home that evening, tired but excited, filling the house with the energy only she could bring. She kissed Daniel like she hadn't seen him in years, her hands curled into his shirt, laughing when he stumbled back in surprise. Nina stood in the doorway, watching. "Miss me?" Sarah teased. Nuzzling against him, Daniel chuckled, recovering quickly. "Of course, the house is too quiet without you." It was an innocent moment, a moment that should have reassured Nina, should have reminded her that this was Sarah's husband, Sarah's life. But all she felt was an unbearable ache. At dinner, the conversation flowed as if nothing had changed. Sarah recounted stories from her trip, her voice animated, her eyes bright. She reached for Daniel's hand absent-mindedly, the way she always did, and he squeezed it without thinking. Nina forced herself to smile, to nod at the right moments, to pretend her stomach wasn't twisting with every display of affection between them. Then Sarah turned to her. "I was telling Daniel earlier, you should start dating again." She grinned. "I mean, I love having you here, but you can't hide forever." Nina's pulse spiked. "I'm not hiding." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You never go out. When's the last time you even looked at someone?" Nina forced out a laugh. "Maybe I'm just not ready, or maybe you've already found someone," Sarah teased. The words hung in the air, heavier than Sarah intended. Across the table, Daniel's fingers tensed around his fork. Nina looked away. That night, she tried to sleep. She tried to push the thought of Daniel from her mind, to remind herself that Sarah was right. She needed to move on, to rebuild her life. But then there was a knock at her door, soft, hesitant. Nina sat up, heart pounding. She didn't have to ask who it was. She already knew. For a long moment, she didn't move. She could pretend she didn't hear it. She could stay in bed, let the moment pass, let the temptation dissolve into the darkness. But her feet touched the floor before she could convince herself. She opened the door. Daniel stood there, his expression unreadable, his hands clenched at his sides. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. And when he stepped inside, Nina didn't stop him.